Hello and welcome everyone to Everybody Hacks' fourth and final panel for this year. This panel is a GIS and data science special. So we have 4 speakers joining us with experience in geography, GIS, and data science. And we're really excited to have them. Just a quick announcement, the hackathon registration is now open. You can find web information about that on our Linktree, and we'll be publishing it on our website and Instagram soon. In other news, actually, I don't think there's any other news. So welcome to our panel. We're really excited to have you all, and let us introduce our team members first. My name is Argia Khandelwal. I'm the committee chair. Next, Zulkifli, would you like to go?
Hi, my name is Zulkifli, and I am the event planning chair. And we also have Walter.
Hi, my name is Walter, and I'm in the logistics team in the UW Hack. Yep.
All right, without further ado, why don't we introduce the speakers? Zulkifli, I'll let you go first.
Okay. So the first speaker we will be announcing is Phil M. Hurvitz. Phil Hurvitz is a research scientist for the CSDE. He helps maintain the performance and security of the CSDE's UW data collaborative servers. The UW DC supports evidence-driven policy making and interdisciplinary research. Please give it up for Phil Hurvitz.
All right. Can you see my slides?
Yes.
Yeah. So I should mention that what you said about my position is partially true. I also do a lot of work as a scientist on various funded projects with PIs at the university and elsewhere. So I'll start. I use typical male pronouns, and I was actually born in Japan, but I moved to Seattle before I was a year old, so I don't remember anything about Japan. And although I'm not actually a native, the longest I've ever been away in about 60 years is 5 months at a stretch. And that was driving around the United States, which I highly recommend taking a trip, any trip that you can. My hobbies outside of the work that I do, which I kind of consider work a hobby because I'm lucky that the work that I do, I find interesting and fun. But when I'm not working, I love cooking and eating interesting food. I play the ukulele a little bit informally with friends, playing mostly old pop songs from the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s. I love to go out shell fishing. I went out and got 20 razor clams, 40 manila clams, and 18 oysters last week on Wednesday. And I should also mention that I'm married and I have 2 young children in Seattle Public Schools in 5th and 3rd grade. So I got my bachelor's degree in humanities from Seattle University in 1983, and then took a break about 10 years, went back for a master's in forest resources here at the UW, and really focused mostly on GIS in that degree program. And then about another 10 years passed, and I enrolled again into a PhD program at UW in urban design and planning. So you'll notice these big breaks in between educational stints. What can you do with a bachelor's degree in humanities? Well, various jobs, one of which is I cooked professionally for about 10 years. And then realized I was kind of getting old and should do something else with my life. And that's when I went in and started on the master's degree. So after finishing the master's, I had a few great opportunities to be a GIS programmer analyst. I worked for the university's experimental forest near Mount Rainier, and then really learned a lot working at Seattle Watershed and the city of SeaTac. And then had another couple opportunities to teach GIS at Green River Community College. And I'll say, if you really want to learn GIS, teach it, because you'll learn so much more by knowing how to explain things and diving deeply. And then through another job switched jobs, came back to the University of Washington as a GIS consultant for the College of Forest Resources and taught while I was there. Then when I went back in for my PhD, I worked as a research assistant for about 6 years while I was working on the degree. Then had a 1-year postdoc in urban design and planning. And then eventually was promoted to a research assistant and research associate professor in urban design and planning, where I was for about 7 years. And then not too long ago, switched over to become a research scientist here at the Center for Studies in Demography and Ecology. My area of study really is geographic data science. I have the strong background in GIS from forestry, and then learned a lot about epidemiology and public health while I was working on the PhD. And most of the work that I've done, publishable work, is looking at built environment and health-related behaviors and outcomes. So we have interdisciplinary teams that are public health, epidemiology, statistics people, and then I provide the background to do the spatial measurements. Most of the work is geared toward influencing policy and design. So this is kind of where the idea of doing something that's for the good comes in. And what we want to do is we want to know how people behave, and so that we can build places where better and healthier lifestyles are the default choice rather than a choice that you have to make. If you live in a sick world, it's likely that you'll become sick, but if you live in a healthy world, you should become healthier. So we're interested in making places where there's better food, better transportation, and more physical activity as part of your daily life. The tools that I've used in my research include ubiquitous sensing, so having people walk around with GPS units and accelerometers to measure location and physical activity. And then primarily I'm using open source geospatial. So I use PostGIS, R, and QGIS. I used to use ARC and Esri years ago. The only thing I really use it for now is geocoding. All of the other work has gone into this open source. And then do almost all of the real data work with SQL and programming and statistics in R. You can ask me later about why one might want to shift from Esri to an open source geospatial platform. Advice to students: think big, have high ambitions. You'll get as high as your ambitions are, and if your ambitions are low, don't expect to go beyond that. So don't, the sky's the limit. Particularly when you're in school, don't be afraid to fail at a task. You'll probably learn more by making mistakes, and making mistakes at school is great because you're learning, right? And whereas if you make mistakes on the job, things like satellites crash into Mars. As a student, don't apologize for not knowing something, because if you already knew how to do all this stuff, why would you even be in school? So very frequently people say, oh, sorry, I didn't do this right. And I'm like, my motto is a silly question is better than a silly mistake also. If there's any technical advice, it's to learn a modern programming language. I use R. I wish I had taken the dive into Python years ago. And then also learn to use relational databases. I'll share these slides later, but I have more information that you can look up, so you can contact me if you have questions, my CV, my NIH bibliography, and then some of these other resources are things that you could learn a little bit about the stuff that I teach and do research in. So that's all I've got for now. And so I'm going to stop sharing the screen. All right. Next.
Thank you, Philip, for your talk and for sharing with us about your career. That was really interesting. I'm kind of interested in public health too, so it was good to hear from you. Our next speaker is Professor Wig Chan, who is a professor at our very own UW Geography Department. He studies migrants in China and the problems that they face, especially with reference to the hukou system, which is a discriminatory household registration system that determines one's citizenship rights and access to social benefits. Without further ado, please welcome Professor Chan.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Yeah, okay. Yeah, okay. Thank you for having me here. Wig Chan, he and him. I would consider now these days, I was obviously not born in this country, but I would pretty much consider myself Seattle my hometown, because that's where I have lived the longest now. You know, it passed my 30 years, out of my 60-some year of life. I was actually born in China, but grew up in Hong Kong. So I always thought that Hong Kong was my hometown, but I think I started to shift, and maybe not yet quite think that I'm a native. You know, like a few have said, I would consider this is my hometown. I have a variety of interests. And the trouble is that I don't have time to do so many things. So I obviously have to prioritize them. And in my latest prioritization, I put workout as actually one of the much higher ones. So I've been doing, you know, very brisk or sometimes slow jogging, you know, almost daily. And then on weekend, go hiking. And then I have recently also revived, like this is like for a month, almost playing several times a mini ping pong, you know, several times a week. I don't know if you know what is mini ping pong. This is not a full size ping pong table, but it's a half size, which can fit into my family room easily. And then we can, and it's actually much faster because the table is smaller. That means it's the back and forth is faster. And I have a lot of work out there. So on top of this, I have other times, if I got time, I love also poetry. You know, some of you may know that I have written some, maybe I did not in this group, but on my website, I do publish some, my Chinese poem, which is an interest that I started a long time ago as a teenager in high school. And I have recently found time, partly because of the technology too, because now I can write my poem just on a cell phone, anytime it comes to me, and keep revising it on the bus, you know, wherever I get some small time. So I have a lot of fun, and I think it's also helped me to put better perspective, particularly now we're in a very stressful time in the last 3 or 4 years. I mean, not just the pandemic, you know, things happening in my, you know, in Hong Kong, things happening in China really get me also feel very stressed, you know, too, you know, and the deteriorating, you know, China and US relations also put a lot of pressure, you know, on some of our work too. So let me share my screen. I think that can give you a feel of what sort of thing that I'm doing. So this is going to my homepage, and so to give you a sense, you can see that on top of here, you can see that I published, actually author and co-edited 3 books. And that can give you a sense, these are just in the last 4 years. You know, Children of Migrants, Urban China Reframed, and when I say Chinese characteristics, the hukou system that I keep mentioned. So you see that, and then on top, right down, I put some of my more opinion piece here. And I think this is the thing that I see, apart from my work of helping students understand. I've been with UW for the last 30 years. This is my only one job, okay? And I only do one thing. I can only do one thing, that's teaching. So this is my one job in America since I migrated from Hong Kong to here. So I help, obviously, my main task is to help students understand a lot of things going on, particularly with regard to China. And I was recruited to teach, you know, 3 or 4 classes on China plus also statistics, and you can see that in my, for example, in my latest piece, opinion piece is also talking about Chinese hookah reform. So this is really big, and this is actually a piece I did for the World Bank. This is coming from a World Bank project I did, last fall, and they also wanted to commemorate the Day of Migrants, International Day of Migrants. Actually, I don't know, you may not know that actually December 17 is the Day of International Migrant. There's a day that's set for that, and the World Bank decided to publish my piece, on that day as a come on to that. And of course, you will see that I also play with data a lot. Like the next piece that I did for another foundation last summer. This is for the Jamestown Foundation. Is looking at census data and play with the census data. There's a lot of data aspect of this that I got myself involved in. And then, of course, a piece that will be soon come out. I mean, I actually put a draft there on my website. Is a China geographer's view of the largest city in the world. So that I think that continue to, I guess, continue to remind and also show my interest in not just interest in China. I mean, interest in China, that's true. At the same time, I'm also interested in the much bigger world. Okay, so that's why I kind of look at this. And actually, this piece has a lot of data issues about how we define what is a city, what is all this. So I think, in fact, it turned out that actually it's not as simple as we usually think. Actually, it's quite complicated. So if we want to get to that, so my main work, you'll see that my main work actually is trying to understand this phenomena. This is very, very important phenomena in the globe, in the last 40 years, made in China, and China's economic success, and China becoming the world's factory. And all of this, I think there's a little secret, a recipe that's not very well known to the world about what is going on. And I'm not going to give you another lecture on the hookah system, but I just want to briefly show you one graph that's showing you, this is the latest graph from 2020. This is Chinese census. You can see the Chinese urban population now is running about 900 million. I mean, this is quite something. Very soon it will reach 1 billion urban population. But the important thing, and this is often overlooked and not being looked at, is that out of these 900 million, about 1/3 of them, actually more than 1/3 of them, actually are called migrants. Okay, this is interesting in China, and that related to a system that actually, even within the 900 million, China has 1.4 billion people, 900 million of them in the city, but out of this, 600 million of them has urban rights. And then the 1/3 of them actually do not have urban rights. And that's why it gets into what is called the hookah system. So China still use this system, which dated back to 1958, they started, and so on and so forth. Basically, it kind of differentiates the China population in two classes. What is urban, what is rural in simple terms. So they have this hookah system, or it's called the household registration system. What it means that if you don't have an urban hookah or local hookah, like the 376 million they talk about, then you're legally, even though you've been in the city for a long time, maybe some of them for 10 years, 20 years, you're not considered a legal immigrant, a legal resident. And then, of course, there are all kinds of discrimination against this, as I listed here, including one of the things that I've been working on quite a bit, is that even their children cannot really go to school in the city. Even though they're working in the city, these 200 workers, but they have all the children that they cannot, so they have to do something else. So that leads to, I think the important thing that I want to draw in here is that out of this picture, I think what I was missing in the past that I didn't really talk about is that this is a thing called the China price, because this anonymous system allowed China really to be able to be very, very, very competitive and therefore take all the jobs because it's so cheap. So that obviously caused a lot of problems. And one of the problems, particularly with geography is concerned, I've been studying this quite a bit lately. For example, this is using Chinese 2000 census data. We can map them. And you see that what is going on in China now is that you've got about all these workers that's working in the factory here along the coast. These are the coastal industrial towns, major cities, Shanghai here, Shenzhen here, all these major towns. So they're here, the migrant, their parents are here. But then because their kids cannot go to school, so therefore they are oftentimes left behind in the countryside. Okay, so these are the major provinces where you have all these left behind kids. And you can see that it's just the it's a geography of family, separated family. In some way, I think this is oftentimes, unfortunately, the kind of thing that migrants family often have to face, being separated. And the size, given Chinese size, and given the amount of migrant worker in that, you can quite easily imagine that this is this size, actually the size here, these left behind children, actually enormous. I use 2015 1% survey based on the Chinese national survey, 1% population. I estimated this so-called left behind children, meaning that they are separated from the parents, actually accounted to somewhere around almost like 90 million children. So this is a gigantic, huge number. Okay, so obviously that leads to all kinds of other issues and so on. So I decided to help the public understand this better, because I oftentimes think that there are a lot of misunderstanding about China and a lot of understanding about this phenomena. So this is one thing that I want to just briefly say a little bit, is that I started to came out a little bit more publicly to engage in some of the things. So for example, this is my first English op-ed ever written. This is 2011. You can see this is 2011 here. And there was a Seattle Times in Seattle. So this is Seattle Times that they published something called China is eating our lunch. So I decided to say, no, this is not true, because you guys just misunderstand all the numbers and so on and so forth, because they have not counted the migrant children and so on. So that's why I said China is not eating our lunch. So this is my first op-ed. And since then, I've written many of those here and there. For example, one of the pieces, there's quite a few on my website. If you go down to see it, including, I'm also increasingly writing also in Chinese to speak to a Chinese audience as well, not just the English audience. So talk about the Chinese present children, talk about all kinds of other things. Okay, here and so on and so forth. So some of these. So the I engage the public scholarship in that. For example, one of the pieces that I like, you can go and read on my website, is the City of Dreams, for example. So how Chinese migrants are different, because we often think the city are the dreams. So in a nutshell, I hope, apart from my job of teaching and getting students to work on various kind of things, I also try to engage the public to help the public understand what's really going on, what's the real China, and what is going on. And then because of that, I also often get called now, because I'm increasingly more public by the media. So I get to talk to New York Times reporter, Wall Street Journal reporters, and I was on the BBC, a couple of years ago, looking at some of these issues. And so I was being filmed in one documentary because I make some comments on some of these. And then I'm also involved in some policy issue, particularly like a think tank or the World Bank. World Bank did a lot of work with China, did a lot of work with developing country. Here is, for example, I did a big policy report for an institute called the Paulson Institute based in Chicago. So I did a piece to advocate how we can comprehensively and gradually remove, for example, the hookup system. How can we possibly abolish the hookup system? For example, in this particular piece, I propose a 15-year program to get rid of it, so that you will not create a lot of short-term problem, but in the long term, you can create a better society. So I guess this is something that I consider that's making hopefully a positive effect. As to the final question, as to what will be useful that I can pass on to the student, I guess one of the things that I always think that is very important to be critical, to develop critical thinking, to develop, and also not afraid to be controversial, to really, if you have a question, really to raise questions. Sometimes it's very important to be able to raise a question, then even sometimes try to answer a question, because I think you want to be able to see things that oftentimes are overlooked. And I feel that my work has some sort of nature like this. Well, the hookup system, for example, is I argue that it's oftentimes in the maybe in the peripheral vision of some other people, I try, or sometimes even the blind spot, because they forget about that sort of thing. So they make sort of comments and judgment and analysis that are not real for China. I also would think that, as I said, that we need to develop a broad view of looking at things. So that's what I often call, we need to be able to look at the forest. And that's very important. Look at the big picture. That's very important. Look at the paradigms. You know, in school, I think we can always explore that. And I encourage students to continue to do that. But at the same time, we'll also need to be able to develop the technical skill to deal with specifics, deal with, and particularly as far as data science is concerned, is the attention to details, being to look through things carefully, develop something, and look at the fine print, you know, carefully, because there are all kinds of misleading, you know, commercials or propaganda out there. They are just getting you to think about this. I think you really want to think about whether that's true and not true. So I will stop here. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Chan. So I'm actually from Hong Kong too, so I'm really interested, in the topic you just talked about. So so let me introduce our next speaker, Monika Khandelwal, who is an entrepreneurial data scientist whose work focuses on identifying business and human development opportunities and applying analytical solutions on them. She primarily uses her skills in an incremental business context to speak on ethical questions related to fairness, bias, and societal applications on machine learning. So thank you, Professor. Thank you, Monika.
Thank you, Walter. Hi, everyone. I am Monika Khandelwal. I go by she, her, and I'm a senior data scientist. I have been an analytics manager, a lead in the past. From an individual contributor, I have moved to a managerial role and then moved back to being an individual contributor, which is something you can do in this field. And I hope to speak and convince why this is the right field for anybody who has any interest in our world and in themselves at this point. Big goal, but we'll get there. So I was born and raised in Delhi, India. And in the 5th grade, I discovered computers in the computer lab, and I saw a mail merge software, WordStar. And I saw that I could write one letter and give it a list of 100 names, and it would print out 100 personalized letters for me. So essentially, I am an energy conserver. And if I can code and make things easy, then why not do that? Make life easy for yourself. That's what put me on this path. My life's goal is to keep coding and do things, but essentially code. So I started off as a computer science engineer in India. I joined TCS, India's premier consultancy company, worked there for 3 years. Then I moved to the US. I have moved a lot. At one point in 10 years, I had lived in 11 different cities and 3 continents. So once here, I created and grew 2 human beings. And in that time, in those 10 years, a gap like Dr. Phil's, I picked up 13 hobbies. Physical sports are very difficult for me. None has surprisingly been an intuitive natural learning. So unlike academics and coding, which comes very simple and easy, I've always struggled. So one of the sports, Professor Chan, is ping pong, though not the mini ping pong. And I share no sports with Professor Phillips. But right now in the last 2 years, I've picked up karate and skiing, and I'm in blue level at both. And if you see the map behind me, that's a 5x4 of the US. We have 62 national parks, amazing wonders of the world. As a family, we have hiked in 44 of those and over 100 of national parks and territories. I mean, to grow intellectually, to grow physically, this is a resource which I think is unique. America has done something superbly awesome and unique in preserving and growing our national parks. So highly recommend that. Now, so post my break, my 10-year break, I found that it was very easy to go back to becoming a working professional again. I did my master's in business analytics from Carlson School of Business in the University of Minnesota. And just like that, I could restore, restart, and get in the thick of a bleeding top grade, comes highly sexiest industry of this decade, I suppose, data science and machine learning. It is a very low barrier to enter field right now. And I can speak more to it in the Q&A, but right now for you students in college, you can take courses, or even before that, you can decide to go on Coursera or other MOOCs and pick up a language. Dr. Phil, you can learn, Professor Phil, you can learn it now. So pick up a Python course, do it, see if you like it. And then if you like it, go for hackathons. I mean, we are here because of the hackathon that's happening in May, and I highly recommend it. But there are online sources, there's Kaggle. You can go and compete there, or you can go and see people are competing and people are sharing. It's everything you need to know is out there. You go and look and you can get sucked in that and then just keep doing it. And so I didn't have a slide, but I have a very small, quick demo. It's not mine, but I saw it. And since I recreated it, I cannot credit the source because I don't know who the source is, but I just remember this. So if you see this, we have a person, and these are the life choices that she can make, right? And we always feel like, okay, you could have gone, and I'm sorry, I'm speaking because I didn't know. So you could have gone and taken this path, but this is the path you chose to take. You took this path, then you branched out here, then you came here, and your life choice has brought you here. And when we hear your choices define you. But even at this point, when you have arrived here, from here, you have the whole gamut still available to you, the whole range, the whole complexity. So you actually define your choices, and you can do that at any point of time. So wherever you are, you're here right now, you can just diverge out and branch out into many different ways and do many different things. Post my master's in business analytics, I have worked in 3 different industries in 3 different companies. So I've worked in Sears, which was retail, and we called it a company in transition, but essentially it was in decline. And then I moved to Thomson Reuters, and that was the legal field. And then again, it was a different role from one to the other. And that was a stable company. And then my most recent role has been in T-Mobile here in Seattle, where it's a growth company. Since I've been there, it's gone from number 3 to number 2. And the work that comes to me as a data scientist in these places differs from the company's culture, differs based on the industry. And it's very interesting how the tools that I use are the same, right? I code in R, I code in Python, I present in Tableau. But the work that you're doing, the logic that you're bringing to it, the problem that you're solving is completely different. So you can reinvent yourself with this anytime you want. You can change the scale of your company. You can actually, it's a very diverse and open field. You can change countries and continents at this point easily with that. It offers a flexibility in life, which I don't think it's very common for other industries and jobs. Also, when I was doing my master's, when I went back for my master's, some of us were coming from an engineering background, but some were coming from pure sciences. There was one person from a marketing business background, and then there was some from the financial services. And then we would do projects together. Each of these different viewpoints would bring something unique to the project. So it's not a linear, and if you're actually coming from a different field to this, you are bringing very unique insights, which can help crack that problem more than you know. It's even rapidly changing. Like when I learned neural networks, sigmoid functions were the way to do it. Those were the activation functions, and this might get too technical. But in those 5 years, now when you say sigmoid, you give it as an example of what's the problems with it and why not to use it. So you've gone to ReLU, you've gone to Tang, you've gone to Swish. It's changed in the 5 years in which I learned it. And I learned top of the line skills of that time. So it's rapidly changing. You might go in, come up with something that you learned in a different place, apply it here, and be known as the mother and father of that in this field for the next 5 years. So it's open, it's changing, and it's very flexible. Definitely check it out if you're thinking about it. Now, I'll check how I'm doing on time here. I think I might have 2-3 more minutes. So I want to speak for a little bit on the social responsibility that this field brings. So we all have seen examples, right? We've seen how Microsoft built a chatbot based on conversations in Twitter. And they were trying to recreate the chatbot to be realistic, like people, and it did that. But the people that it picked up had some biases of their own. So the chatbot turned out to be a little bit racist, a little bit misogynistic, which was just representing what was happening, what it trained on. And then that opens up the other side. The other side is, if you want to represent something in a realistic way, but you want to correct some errors there, then who gets to decide what needs to be corrected, right? Somebody has to be decided as the arbitrator. And do you have that power? And then are you making the right decisions? So of course, that brings you to the other side. If you get to decide the conversation, should you have boundaries? Should you have a social point where you stop, or maybe a consensus socially? Maybe one idea which came up, which was very funny, was every 30 minutes that you spend on Twitch or Netflix or YouTube, you have to spend 1 minute contributing to the global discourse on this and making that decision together. But yeah, it's one end and it's the other end. And then when you're building these models, there's a concept of, which came up, which was fairness through unawareness. Like we all know that females get paid less. So if you're building a model that's deciding the salary, then how about you just eliminate that one gender component? You don't put that feature in your model, and now your model is blind to that. So it will predict some amount and you offer everybody that amount and you made it blind. But things are never as simple as that. So I'm also on the board of my master's program with the University of Minnesota Carlson School. And we have the Analytics for Good Institute, where we are trying to solve, we offer some resources, we offer some of our students spending their time on society problems. And there was this housing, fairness in housing and no biases. And they discovered that if race is obviously biased against in many ways, but if they eliminate race as a feature, then there are other features which kind of proxy for race. So they didn't really eliminate it. It is still there. But while they are thinking that this is race blind, the model might actually perpetuate the stereotyping and the bias against some specific race. So in this case, what's happening is that a race blind approach is less efficient than maybe if we could have implemented a race conscious approach. But that brings in its own filter of somebody making that decision. In my own work, I'll maybe take another minute and just speak to this also. I was saving this for the Q&A, but I was building this common items, common pricing model. It was a pilot project in CS where we said, let's look at everybody who bought something in the store. And then we have the data of how frequently a person consumes that thing. So you can, I coded it. It was a very interesting, fun piece of code. So I see what you bought, the 10 things you bought, and then I see the timings of those 10 things. And then I say that, okay, you will need razors in a month, you will need clothes, winter clothes in another 2 months based on what you have bought. So now we are offering you coupons on that timeline. So when I know that you're going to run out is when you're going to receive a pop-up on your phone that if you step in the store in the next week, you'll get a 10% off on this. So when I'm building this, the decision that I have is it's for Kmart and CS stores that which do I simply add all products to it, or do I take out maybe the habit forming ones? Like, do I take out alcohol? Do I take out cigarettes? Because I don't want people to be coming and buying those, even when they might be trying to get rid of those, they might be working on abstaining, and now I'm giving them reminders. And then now once I'm deciding that, it's a slippery slope, because till what extent do I want to go for? Maybe there are lifestyle choice products which might not be good for you, but do I get to decide that or not? And I actually did get to decide it because this was my pilot project. So I, on my arbitration, checking with legal, decided that these components might not be in there. But the reason I brought this up was because this was a pilot, and you get to do these pilots. In my field, I see time and again, especially because newer and newer companies are going for this. When I went in to Thomson Reuters, they said, we are marketing this. What can data science do for us? And they didn't have data science within that product's marketing division. So you are coming in, you are setting up things, you're deciding things, you're learning things at the same time. It's perfectly the right time and perfectly the right field for anyone. Also, as a female, I've never faced any barrier, because whatever you can learn online, you can learn interacting with people. If anything, I feel that this is, so let me qualify that. So we see that we have less representation of women in computer science and engineering. That comes in because they might get demotivated when it's the time they get the inspiration to join these fields, right, in school and college. But now when you're all here, when you are in this environment, nothing is stopping you. And in fact, because there are less females, I feel there is more welcoming, and I found it easier and always welcoming. So go for it, have fun. And to end, a pseudo inspirational quote: whatever you do, give it your 100%, unless you are donating blood.
Thank you so much, Monika, for in the beginning, you did a very brief but very impactful demo of the paths and lives. You are very well spoken, and I was captivated throughout your entire presentation. And it's super interesting to hear you speak about the different topics such as sigmoid ethics, such as fairness through awareness, and the current work that you're doing right now to achieve your different goals and fulfill like the different questions that you wanted to answer with the product and service. So thank you so much, Monika, for your time. I will now go ahead and announce the next speaker, Josh Popelka. Josh Popelka worked with the GIS Center to support the 2021 Kensington County Districting Committee to mediate competing priorities between citizens. His team was able to ensure that citizens will have equal representation for the next 10 years on King County Council. Please give it up for Josh Popelka.
Hey, thank you. So I guess, yeah, my name is Josh. I'm a GIS specialist at the King County GIS Center. I go by he, him pronouns. Just to give you a little background on who I am and my career path. I grew up in Ames, Iowa, which is a town of about 50,000. It's where Iowa State University is. Went to high school there and actually attended college in the Twin Cities at Augsburg University for a year, and then transferred back to Iowa to finish my degree, which ended up being in history. So I think throughout my talk, one of the big themes is that go the direction that you're passionate in. And it may not seem like you're moving forward to the goal that you want, but in the end, if you're just doing what you believe in, what you're passionate about, you'll find your footing. So after college, there's not a whole lot of jobs you can get with a history degree if you don't want to teach, or if you don't want to go to law school. So I actually joined AmeriCorps programs, so conservation corps in both Arizona and Minnesota. So working in Grand Canyon, Saguaro National Park in Arizona. In northern Minnesota, working in the boundary waters, I was a crew leader, so taking about 10 kids aged 18 to 25 out into the wilderness for work trips where we do habitat restoration or fields reduction or trail work. Basically anything the Forest Service needed to do, but didn't really have the power, the staffing to do. And that was kind of like the start of my GIS and maps fascination. So when I was out there, we would have to create maps and navigate with map and compass. You'd be GPSing locations, burn areas, trying to refine trails that have been burned over for 10 years. So you're kind of doing investigative mapping work out there. And that was really cool. And I really, really took to it. And I found that I kind of finally found like, this is what I want to do. And after that, I worked for the National Park Service for about 10 years at Isle Royale National Park, and then at Mesa Verde National Park as a trail crew member. So basically just doing a lot of construction work, physical work outside. And I've always really liked working outside and doing construction projects, landscaping. And that fit really well, but at a certain point, your body starts to break down, which happened to me. And I had a really bad knee injury. Moved to Seattle to be closer to family, and in 2012 had that surgery, and then Ironically, the only job I could find was working for King County Parks doing volunteer and trail construction. But I love that work. It was seasonal. And then after doing that for about 3 or 4 years, seasonal on and off, kind of trying to find, 6 months, get a job, 6 months, get another job. That kind of gets old after a while. But I found a full-time position with King County Road Services Division in 2016, doing stormwater mapping. And for me, that was a perfect combination of outdoors work, really physical, but also back in the office doing GIS, relational databases, all that kind of stuff. It's kind of like IT and construction combined. It was a perfect fit for what I wanted. And I've always been interested in maps. I grew up reading National Geographic. I grew up being the navigator on our family road trips around the Midwest. That trails, wildland, natural resources work that I did, it always involved maps. I got a UW grad certificate in GIS and cartography in 2015. And that's kind of how I got my job at Rhodes. Was I had all the skills, but I didn't have that extra boost of education. And they took a chance on me, and I'm really glad they did. And I think I couldn't be happier. And then I moved to the GIS Center in just last year, so during the pandemic. And what I'm most passionate about in my work is open data, making sure people have the resources that they need. The King County GIS Center, we put out resources like IMAP, the assessor's map, where people can look up data that they need to inform their daily lives. We have local food finders so people can find farmers markets. In my project that I worked on with a couple of my coworkers on the 2021 King County redistricting, that's another example of where, as government employees, I think now more than ever, we're kind of viewed skeptically, because government work has not always been recently unbiased, and that's something that I really take to heart, is that being transparent about our work, open about our data, it builds that trust with the public. And I think we as GIS professionals really have an important role in providing that data to the public, but also providing it in a way that doesn't misrepresent the data. Learning statistics, learning how to symbolize things, learning, what color blindness means for the different types, and what maps will work for one and not for another, and really being aware of the population that you're serving, and that things that you're putting out need to be accessible to everyone. And I'm going to share a screen here. Sorry about that. So let me know, can you see the couple maps here? Yeah, so basically with the districting project was really unique, because we had to take the new 2020 census data, which I'm sure, if you read the news, it was a little late coming in. So we kind of were under a lot of pressure to get things, not only this project done, but get the census data downloaded, note any corrections that needed to be done, anything like that. But King County over the last 10 years has grown immensely. So I mean, each district was plus or minus about 10 or 15,000 people over or under, and the growth in population was not equally distributed. So in this image here, you can see that the 3 ADA districts needed to contract, and the rest of the districts need to expand, and some needed to contract as much as 21,000, some needed to expand, 8,000, 6,000, 8,000. It doesn't sound like much, but when you're dealing with these tight tolerances here, where census tracts, there could be 1,000 people, the next census tract over could be, 50 people. You're trying to balance creating these districts based on those census blocks, and also public input. So if you're living in District 2, University of Washington is in District 2. You have to balance people's wants and needs, the community groups, and also with the reality of the population and where districts can move. Because if District 4 here, it needs to contract. So there's no way for it to really move if all the districts around it have to expand into it. So we did our best, and I think the commissioners did a fantastic job of taking public input, really putting those out, really hearing community concerns about which district they wanted to be in, or which community group was concerned about one issue or another. And another element to that was that we had to follow pretty strict state laws. Each district had to be equal in population as much as possible. We got it to within 1/10 of 1% for each. They had to be compact, contiguous, and use existing natural or municipality boundaries. So you can have a district connect, across Vashon or something. So King County is a little interesting because of the islands that we have, but you don't want to disconnect people. Preserve those communities of related mutual interest. But more importantly, you cannot use that population data to basically gerrymander. Don't favor one political party over another political party, favor one racial group over another. We really, really tried hard to, because that data is available in the US Census data. And there's ways that you can do it without, you just have to be honest in your work. You have to have integrity, and you really have to take on that responsibility that you are unbiased, you are an objective element to this process. And I felt it was like our job to provide that objective analysis to the commissioners so they could have, a middle point to, a couple of different views on, where one district should move, or this way or that way. They had the tools to say, this will make sense because of X, Y, and Z. I've included some links and contact info as well. We do a lot of great work at the GIS Center. We have these, the districting committee has a website, GIS Center. We also have a blog where we highlight special projects or efforts that we're working on. But I'd also like to kind of plug the Seattle districting process that's going on right now. It's still early enough for the public to get involved. So if you guys do want to get involved, there's I've included a link here. But it's a really interesting process about, using data to make sure that people are equally represented, that no one is overbearing or overpowering another group, and that making sure that every voice is heard and every community group is heard in an equal and representative type of way. I think for advice for you guys, I think what helped me out was just doing whatever I felt was the right thing to do at that moment. And of course, you always have to be a little responsible with that. But my career path was not straight. It wasn't, I didn't graduate with a GIS degree, get a GIS technician degree, job out of college, and then analyst and specialist. It was all over the place. I lived in 6 different states. I moved every 6 months for about 10 years. At some point, I wanted a stable life, and I think that's why I ended up where I am now. But I really enjoy what I do. I love the diversity of the work. It's never, a day can be in the morning, I'm working on a fish toxins project, and I'm using ArcGIS indoors to do reservation systems so people can stay safe and stay 6 feet apart, and just making sure our buildings are safe for occupants and the public. And then the other afternoon, I work on a planning project for zoning or comprehensive land use. So really, GIS is great for me because it has a it'll have a diversity. So I think I'll leave it at that because I want to leave some time for you guys to ask questions. But really appreciate the opportunity, and thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Josh, for sharing. I think it was really interesting hearing about your work and the redistricting project and some of the ethical nuances that you guys had to deal with and think about in GIS mapping in general. Super fascinating. So thank you. And thank you again to all of our speakers. You guys have been so awesome today. Every single one of your talks has been so fascinating and captivating. And thank you so much for joining and for sharing your stories with us and for giving your time to support the hackathon and our panel series. So on behalf of the entire team, I really appreciate it. So thank you so much. At this point, I think we have time for maybe one question. I'll open it up to the audience to see if anyone has a question. But if not, we had a question for you all. I guess a pretty quick one. What are your most and least favorite things about your work? And I guess we can do a roundtable and ask each panelist this one. We can go in order of, well, actually we can go in order of whoever volunteers first. So let us know, what are your most and least favorite things about your work?
I can go first, that's fine. So my favorite part was just, I think I talked about it a little bit, but the diversity of the work and work for the county. I feel like I'm an objective observer and provider of data that people can use to make better decisions. The least favorite part of my work, I don't know. I mean, I think sometimes it's really hard to get folks who aren't really familiar with GIS or data science to really buy into that program. And I think each of us as GIS or data science professionals also has a responsibility to educate our users and the public about the benefits that can come along with it, and not just kind of zooming along at 100 miles an hour and saying, this will work, but taking time to explain it and make sure that they're comfortable with it and they understand the process.
Thank you. That was a good response. Any of our other speakers?
I can go next. The least favorite part of my work is, as I said, I'm about efficiency and about making things work for you. So I thought that maybe moving into a more of a consultant role, which has been my most recent role, might be easy and fun because you're, telling people what to do. You're the know-it-all who's designing things and telling it to them. But I found that it wasn't for me. It wasn't for me because, and that actually brings in my favorite part about the work as well. What I like doing is doing things which are changing some things. You build a product and then you see people using it and there's a difference that it's making. Then you're taking feedback and you're refining it, and then maybe you're offering something that they didn't have before, and it's a wow and an aha. But in this role, I found that my effort was not being spent on making the product better, but on making my slide better. So some senior person is going to consume it. It's good, you're getting rewarded, you're getting recognized, but all your work is for a presentation to a person above you, and you're working on presenting it the best instead of actually making things and changing things. So I didn't really enjoy that experience that much. I think you need to be in a more senior position if you want to do that.
Nice. That was really interesting. I didn't know that about the field. Professor Chan or Dr. Hurvitz, anything to add?
Sure, I'll go ahead. I'll do two and two. So the two things that I like spending my least amount of time on, one is writing papers, even though that is the currency at the University of Washington and it must be done. The other one, I don't like having to report stuff, right? So it's like, oh, who's using the data set? What are they using it for? And again, this is like, we have to have that information for our center grant to show that we've done stuff and we've supported people. The two things I like best are one, I just love programming and solving really difficult technical problems in GIS. I could spend my whole day doing that. And the other one is when I do something that helps another person solve a sticky problem and lets them continue with their research.
Hi, yeah, I think to some extent my best one and the worst one are actually quite similar. Maybe that's to feel. I hate dealing with all the bureaucracy. They have all kinds of other stuff, and we have some of the things like you said. I mean, that's really perhaps not the fun part of my career at university. You know, there are all kinds of bureaucracy. They have all sorts of things. But the best part of this is that I'm always working with mostly much younger people, and I feel like I'm also very young. I still, you know, that's I think that's the best part. And there's always that sort of vitality, dynamism in the young people and different things and so on. And the other part, maybe another best, is that I think sort of intellectual, you know, there's a lot of gratification in sort of intellectual pursuit. I mean, like there's looking at, for example, studying Chinese data, because of my attention details, often discover things that are not discovered by other people or just overlooked. So there's all these aha moment, and I think that's really fun. And of course, I can then brag of it, you know, with students, with other people, that I discover something that very few people see. So that's the sort of intellectual curiosity, and perhaps that's still so that I'm still young. That I okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I really liked all of your guys' most favorite and least favorite things. I think they were very insightful and gave us an extra look into your careers and your specific, I don't know, place in your careers and stuff like that. So thank you. This has been like a super, super fascinating talk. Thank you again for all four of you for joining us. Thank you to the audience who joined. And for those of you who are watching asynchronously, thank you for watching and giving us views. So yeah, I guess with that, oh, I think a couple of our speakers have shared their information in the chat. So I'll make sure to copy that so we can send it out in the email to everyone who RSVP'd. But yeah, we've gone a little over time, so I'll just say thank you so much to everyone who joined today. Don't forget the hackathon is on May 14th. If you're interested in registering, that information is on our website and Linktree and Instagram. Thanks again. All right, have a good one, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Walter.